Let's go to Ann Arbor. The All-American guy, Joel Klatt, is with us. I watched some of Klatt. Like yesterday morning, I got up, I'm flipping channels, and FS2 had all these Joel Klatt programs back. It was like Thanksgiving with Klatt. Yeah, man, I was blown away.
His summer interview series?
Yeah, it was he
really
and Ryan
good.
Day, and then it was him standing in front of a green screen breaking down Michigan and Ohio State. Oh, you're amazing.
Well, it's going to be a big one, fellas. I can tell you that. I've done this game now since 2000 and I don't know, 16, I think it is. No, 17. 17 was our first game. And none of them have felt like this. None of them. Even last year as an undefeated matchup, they didn't feel like this. Even in 2018 when Michigan rolled into Ohio State as the favored team. Remember, they had lost like the week 1 to Notre Dame, and then they rolled off all those. They had that revenge tour. This one is just so different. It's so much larger. There's so much animus surrounding it with the fan bases at each other's throat. Coaching staffs don't like each other. And these two teams are really, really good. I don't know if they could – I don't know about Georgia good, but, man, they're really good.
Boy, the narrative has really changed on this game in the last 3 years, too. If you go back to 2021, it was Jim Harbaugh can't coach in the big game. And now Ohio State fans might be scratching their head with Ryan Day. The amazing thing, and you know this, Joel, he's 40-0 against all other Big Ten teams, and he's 1-2 against Michigan, but the guy gets criticized because he's 1-2 against Michigan.
He's also 56-6 as a head coach. 5 of those 6 were top 5 opponents, and like unbelievable. Trevor Lawrence Clemson team, the Mac Jones undefeated Bama team. He's lost to some freaking good teams. So yeah, it is an interesting narrative, but that's the way it goes. Because remember, the last Ohio State coach to lose 3 in a row to Michigan was John Cooper in the mid '90s, and we know John Cooper for one thing. We don't think about his successes. We don't think about how good the program was. We think about the fact that he couldn't get the job done against Michigan. So that's largely why Jim Tressel was at Ohio State. That's why Jim Tressel led off his entire tenure at Ohio State in that pep rally. If you remember, he said, you're going to be proud of our kids in the classroom, and you're going to be proud of our kids in the community, and you'll be damn sure proud of them in 360, whatever it was, 2 days in Ann Arbor. I mean, that's the whole thing. As Urban Meyer said, it's a way of life. So it definitely has turned around. It's flipped. And yet, I think that there is a really palpable sense from the people on the Ohio State side that the last 2 were not legitimate. And, because of the Stallions' advanced scouting and sign stealing operation, they feel like they have been wronged, maybe even more so than some of the other teams. And, they're out for it this year, and they want to go out there and basically play a game that can be categorized as a "see, we told you" type of a game.
If that happens, to me, maybe we saw a little foreshadowing last week with Michigan and Maryland, because Maryland's receivers seem to have a little success against that Michigan secondary, and now you bring in big boy receivers from Ohio State. Is that where the matchup starts?
Yes. I think that it's also the fact that, the short passing game in particular, Maryland did a nice job of just kind of taking what they were going to give in the interior. Michigan wants to maintain a top on the defense and maintain their levels, and then let their defensive line get after it. That's really the way that they're built. And if you can operate quickly in the passing game and get the ball out, in particular into the slot receivers, you can find 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yards and then stay on schedule that way. You don't have to beat your head against the run wall that is their interior defensive line. So to that point, that's where Maryland started having success. And then you've got to go win contested catches when you get the opportunity. Michigan will put their corners on an island at times, and they want their safeties to be involved heavily in the middle of the field. And because of that, you're going to get opportunities. This is why last year Harrison went 7 catches for 120. This is why, by the way, C.J. Stroud the last couple of years has thrown for well over 300 yards against Michigan. It's not like they haven't had success throwing the football. The problem has been is that their defense has had an inability to get off the field. So to me, it's actually not really about Ohio State's offense against Michigan's defense. I feel like I've seen that play out, and I kind of know what we're going to see. The biggest question I have is what is it going to look like with the Michigan offense, which has been the more improved unit over the last couple of years since what they were even in 2021, against the Ohio State defense, which is also vastly improved. Those are the two units to me that are the most different and unique as it relates to the previous matchups in the last few years.
Joel Klatt, of course, the big noon kickoff is the game, Ohio State and Michigan. They call it the game or the big game? The game is
the game.
The game?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be big or doesn't have to be big.
Yeah, one of them's Stanford, California.
No, just the game.
The game.
Which one is Stanford, Cal? It's also the game? Oh,
that's just called big game.
That's A game.
A game. Yes, it's not
A game.
Not much of a game.
Not going to be here anymore.
Klatt is presented.
Very office space there.
Yes, Klatt is presented by MyBookie.ag. Go next round at MyBookie.ag. They will match that sign-on bonus 50% up to $1,000 when you make your initial sign-on at MyBookie.ag when you use code next round. I think Sharon Moore was faced with a lot more decisions in that Maryland game than he anticipated having to be faced with, Klatt.
Yeah.
And I thought he played it pretty conservatively. There were some fourth downs where you were like, you could go for this here. He played it by the book. He punted them deep.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is, because that paid off. And I just wonder, I don't know. You've watched a lot. I felt like Harbaugh might have gone for some of those fourth downs, and he played it very conservatively.
There was one in the first half that he went for, and I was like, he should definitely kick this. And then there was one late that I'm like, hey, it's a one-possession game. You fail on this fourth down, and you're going to be up against it. So it's really interesting. I know that they've talked about it being a collaborative effort. They've talked about that. But I will tell you this. It's really difficult to be an offensive line coach in game. Just offensive line coach, because you're handling more players and more adjustments and scheme than any other position coach on the staff. It's really tough. That's why you see those guys, and man, those offensive linemen for every team, every time the offense comes off, they all gather together, and then that offensive line coach is like down and he's in it and he's talking to him and he's drawing on the board. So that's just a line coach. It's really difficult to be a play caller in a big game. And a game of this magnitude, and have to make adjustments and see it and understand what's going on. What are the adjustments they're making versus the adjustments I'm making? What's succeeding that I didn't expect and that I can lean into? What's not working that I thought was going to work and I need to lean away from? All of those things, that's hard. That's nuanced, and that's something that takes a lot of experience. It's also really hard to be a head coach and manage the emotion level of your team, manage the executive decisions of your team in a big game, in particular, a game in which it's just going to feel different than any other game that you're a part of. Okay, so on one side, Ryan Day is handling 2 of those 3. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, Sharon Moore is handling 3 of those 3. And there's no way it's not going to be a factor, guys. Michigan can try to minimize it. Sharon can try to minimize it. All he wants, there's just no way that this is not a factor. And the reason being is that you can say he's done it 3 times. None of them are going to feel like this. This is like head coaching in a crock pot. It's just going to be a slow simmer boil the entire day. And those decisions get ratcheted up. I think that your emotions start to play with you. You've got to be very good and experienced in those situations. And he's replacing a guy in Jim Harbaugh that has coached for decades. I mean, think about the slow heartbeat that Harbaugh has versus Sharon Moore. Sharon Moore is in the first full-time year of just calling plays, and now he's going to be the acting head coach in the game. Not a game, but the game. It blows my mind to think of the level of pressure and stress that he's going to be under. And so to think that this is not going to be a factor, I think would be I think would be foolish.
Yeah. He's done a hell of a job so far, though. I got to ask you about
No doubt.
I got to ask you about J.J. McCarthy. In my baseball days, we called it a dead arm. Just some days you go out there and it just wasn't there. Your arm just didn't have the same pop or zip. Is he dealing with an injury? Do you know if I missed something? Or why does he look different? He looks different.
It does, and it seems like it's not in his arm though. It seems like it's like an ankle or something where I don't feel like he's got the same base that he had early in the year to develop some of the torque. See, because in football, throwing a football is actually it's way closer to shooting a basketball than it is throwing a baseball. I don't know, like if people realize that, but it's all legs and then flip. Like the way that the ball like releases off of your finger like a shooter. I think that he's dealing with something. I don't know. We're meeting with him here in a couple of hours, and I'll see JJ and obviously talk with him. I thought that he made a couple of decisions last week that were born out of the fact that he didn't want to run. And so that told me more than anything, even more so than the way he was moving around, or was he limping or was he not limping. He made a couple of those decisions. I'm like, okay, that's different. I've watched every snap of this kid this year. He's been developing. If it's not there, he runs, he tucks it, he makes first downs, he escapes the pocket, he becomes a threat on the outside. And that time he just stood in there and kind of like panicked and threw it. And I'm like, timeout. Like that's not right. So I think you're right. I just don't know to the extent or what that he's dealing with, but he better get right quickly. And then the other part of this, just really quick, they couldn't protect the passer in either of those games. Part of why they had to go big and run the ball so often against Penn State, they weren't going to block those defensive ends at Penn State. And we'll see if their pass protection gets hurt early in this game, because I think that would drastically change things.
Hey, before you jumped on, we were talking about the Texas A&M opening. If you were Ross Bjork, do you think, realistic candidates, you could hire the right guy that would win a national championship in 3 to 5 years there? And who would your guy be?
Yeah. So if you were the AD.
Realistic.
I think I've got two guys that could go there and win it all. I would, my list would start with Kalen DeBoer and Jonathan Smith. Now I'm more West Coast than you guys, so I'm sure guys in that part or people in that part.
I love
more.
both, man.
Yeah, you make it sound like my list would start with Cooter Bob and Tommy Joe.
Yeah, you ain't seen this high school coach we got down here, Klatt. This guy, he's wearing out Mississippi high school football.
Yeah, that's right. He is. He's Hugh Freeze 2.0. He's going to do it. I like those guys a lot. And then something just more overarching and philosophical, like if you're Ross Bjork. I think that how do I say this like nicely? We have the quick cycle of hiring and firing in college football, right? The short leash that we have in our sport has depleted the supply of good coaches in our sport. And so openings now don't have the pool of candidates that they did 10, 12, 15, 20 years ago. They just don't. And because of that, what I find is that hot names from a coordinator position, it's harder to find the guys that are ready. It's harder to find the Dan Lanning than it is to find the Kalen DeBoer. And the reason is because Kalen had proven that he's already a good head coach when he got that gig at Washington. Remember now, he's won 100 games as a head coach. So, when I look at that, I take a look at now the road Sark has traveled to be where he's at. Look at Lance Leipold having success at Kansas. Look at Chris Kleiman having success at Kansas State. You look at these guys and you realize you can inherit a great situation, like Riley did at Oklahoma or Day did at Ohio State, and there's been others, like even Kyle Whittingham inherited a good situation at Utah. Or you better have experience at doing what you're going to be asked to do at a place like Texas A&M. So for my money, you go after the proven coach. It might be the lower level. I think the trailer at UTSA is an interesting option because he's won. He might be your next Leipold or Kleiman. And then the other guys that I would look at that are Power 5 coaches are those two that I mentioned. I would also look at Leipold. I would look at Kleiman. And then I'm just going to throw the grenade in there. I know that this guy has done an incredible job at where he's at. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, if there was someone that made a Brian Kelly-esque move and we didn't see it, who would it be? And that guy would be Lane Kiffin. And the reason is because I think that he sits there and he looks at what he's been able to do at Ole Miss and he wonders, is there a ceiling here? Even though they've done an amazing job in NIL, just A&M probably has better resources and it's probably a better job. Maybe does Lane kick the tires and does Ross kick the tires on Lane? I think that would be fascinating.
Bigger surprise in Week 13 that we've got a total in Iowa, Nebraska sitting at 25.5.
Well, I bet it at 24.
I thought it was 23.
I'm looking at 25.5 right now.
MyBookie.ag.
20, listen, 25. I see some value in there. That's at least a point of value.
MyBookie.ag currently 24.5 at this moment right now.
So bigger surprise in Week 13, a total that is 24.5, or the fact that you've got an old school big pen in your hand.
Oh, you don't know about these? Those are
terrible pens. Oh my! Those are some of the worst pens in the history of pens.
I don't know if we can be friends. This is all I use.
Oh no!
This is all I use. I will use this pen until the ink is gone. In fact, I can prove it because I keep the old ones in my little pouch right here. Look at that. That's a big pen that's used all the way down.
I hate how they write.
They are the most
press the hell out of them.
Hey, Rocky, I mean, you guys help me out. Am I wrong here? Am I in the minority? This is a poll question. Big pens are the
more
worst.
Consistent. It writes in the freezing cold. It writes when it's hot. It writes when I'm in a bad hotel room in Ann Arbor. And this thing knows it's down to business. Yeah. This thing stands on business. You know what I mean, Eli?
I hear you, Eli. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the Pilot G2 Bold. I mean, it's like Picasso.
Geez.
Picasso, man.
Why don't you just tell me you're rich without telling me you're rich?
Can't hide it. Can't hide it, can you?
We did use the Bic back in the trailer park days.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Stay true to your roots, everybody. This pen is amazing.
Oh, no.
Man, I can't believe this.
I do think that was NASA. I think NASA developed that back in the 60s to get us to space.
Yeah.
I mean,
and guess what? It probably still could get us to space. This thing is incredible. I love this pen so much. And by the way, I use a notebook. I've got this specific notebook. That's all I use. I've got 10 of them filled up at home. I've got another 8 of them ready that are empty. And the reason I love this notebook is not only because it's leather bound and smells of mahogany, but it's also got this nice little pen holder right here. You see, and it fits my big pen perfectly.
And that big pen, it makes your nice little leather thing. It does devalue. It makes it look cheap.
Yeah, I would tell you this too.
It look cheap.
Oh, a big pen is tacky.
But how many times do you reach into your backpack or your satchel and the big pen top has come off and you have to find the pen in that holder there? It happens all the time.
Hey,
right?
Biggest choking hazard in schools was the big pen top, by the way.
I'm so sad right now because I don't know if we can be friends anymore. This is
seems like we got a big
This problem. Is important to me. We've got a big pen issue right now. This one's important to me.
And it's surprising you go blue instead of black ink.
What?
Yeah.
I'm not a machine. I'm not a printer. Why would I write in black ink?
I'm not a printer. Why would I write?
Well, just give you one of those pens that's got the green and red, and you can pick your color and pop it up.
Yeah.
I think Bic made that one too.
I'm not a sideline reporter. Why would I use a multicolored pen?
I only write in black ink too. Maybe I'm a serial killer. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you are. Let me just tell you that.
As Kevin says in the chat room, Klatt leaving the show with some big Bic energy. Yeah. So we appreciate
That's
that.
right. Oh, easy. Easy there, Desmond.
Gotta enunciate that one, man.
I said it as clearly as...
Slow down. Everyone slow down. Big
with a B.
energy. There we go.
I said it as clearly as my Calhoun County roots would let me, Dunaway.
There
All
you
right,
go.
all right,
There
Klatt,
you
Big
go.
New Kick, the game. Thank you very much for the time. Enjoy it. We'll talk about it with you Monday.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, Ryan and Jim and Lance. I don't even know.
Hey, by the way, there's an opportunity for commercial for you guys. Big Noon Bic, and you do the pen commercial. Big Noon Bic.
Oh, by the way, have you ever stayed at a Hampton Inn?
I think he is right
course.
now. Yeah.
Oh, seriously?
Of course I have.
Yeah.
Seriously.
The waffles are amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard. But the consistency of their service, comfortable rooms, the waffle.
I mean,
I need that waffle.
hey, you're 2 lamps removed from that being the same psych ward I was in back in my college days. It's the same decor. It's white with nothing on the walls. Right now,
Snowstorm room.
do you have your shoelaces in your belt right now?
Yes, I do. Trust me. Guys, this is like a palace compared to minor league baseball. Oh my gosh. Minor league baseball.
They make
was
you
rough.
bunk up with somebody.
Yeah, you're not spooning with a third baseman.
You gotta. I literally, the first night I ever played, got drafted. Go down. I'm going to extended spring in Phoenix. They make us stay right next to the Metroplex on Camelback in the 17 right there at the Premier Inns. And I'm walking. My brother had just played the previous season in that same organization on the same team. And I'm walking, and the maintenance guy from the Premier Inns was like, Jason. And I'm like, no, I'm Joel. And he looks at me all confused. And he's like, what? Like, you guys look exactly the same. I'm like, no, I'm Joel. And he goes, whatever, man. You want free HBO? And I was like, yeah, I would love free HBO. So we walk up to my room, and I walk in, and my roommate, who I've never met before, is literally in his underwear on top of his covers, shirtless, with his hands behind his head. And I was like, yo, man, what's going on? And he's like, hey. And then the maintenance guy pops into the room, and I was like, oh, he's giving us free HBO. And my roommate, never met him, don't know his name yet, just goes, rad. And I'm like, there we go.
Rad. So 80s.
Rad.
Yes. Awesome. All right, Klatt, enjoy the game, buddy. We'll talk with you about it Monday.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving,
You
guys.
too, buddy. Thank you. That is Joel Klatt with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline, as always, presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round to get that 50% deposit match up to $1,000 with MyBookie.ag.